Alrighty, welcome back traders. Kyle Williams here, coming at you with the July 2023 recap here. Unfortunately, a very frustrating month, lost just over $32,000, and mainly all because of one main big loser, which we will talk about in detail. But before that, I want to quickly go over, for those who do not know, I'm sure most of you do, but for the ones who don't, Clover Trading is having a boot camp August 26th through the 28th in Boston. There is a couple of VIP tickets left. There is a dwindling number of regular tickets left. There's going to be Laptop Legend, Nathan Mashad, Sang Lucci as guest speakers, possibly even another trader or two of special appearances, although I can't really say because I can't confirm it. But it's very likely some extra other people show up. But again, there's that. There's also a Traders for a Cause event on Friday, the day before our boot camp. So if you haven't been to an in-person kind of event in general, I think they're one of the greatest things ever. I think the whole reason why I get so excited to not only be kind of having my own with all the other Clover boys in our own boot camp is that going to in-person events when I was first started trading was such a exciting thing. And I was so nervous to go to my first one, being the Tim Sites conference. But once I was there, I was like, why didn't I go to these sooner? They're just such a good time. They're such a great form of education to learn in person. Not only that, but to be able to talk to other like-minded traders. Again, most traders are very, you're kind of in your own little space. You trade on your computer. Your friends and family don't get that we just try to buy and sell stocks to make money. And to come to an environment of in-person kind of teachings and education, and to be able to talk with dozens and if not hundreds of other traders who kind of experience the same things you do, it's an incredible experience every time. We are super excited. So if you are interested, feel free, grab a ticket, and we'll hope to see you there. So without further ado, let's jump right in to the actual month of July here. Like I said, pretty frustrating. It really reminds me, real quick before we jump in, it really reminds me of my April 2022, where again, I took a couple big losses on the same ticker in particular on this month, which led to this really bad week, which led to the entire reason why I was red in April. And so that's kind of almost exactly what happened in July here, where I just let one stock get away from me, not just today, but actually a couple other times as well, which we'll go over. And there was no coming back, right? I wasn't given enough opportunities elsewhere. And even some of the opportunities that you'll see, I didn't make as much as I could have. I didn't execute as well as I could have. So it's like a lot of runners that just led to less and less gains. And then we have one runner, which was CVNA, which was just gave me the mother of all losses, right? So there's no coming back here. Again, kind of really screws up the stats in terms of like my average gain is way smaller than my average loser. Same thing with biggest profit and biggest loss. The percent's okay, but unfortunately that just kind of shows I was way too oversized on my losers and lost a small percent-wise, which is good. But then I wasn't obviously big enough on my winners because, if I make 9.5%, you'd think I'd make more than when I lose. But unfortunately, I didn't due to some bigger losses like we saw or like we're going to see. Top of that, win rate isn't that great. I'll take a 51% win rate, but I have had better months. So anyways, let's jump in. The first week, I really have nothing eventful trading-wise to really remember or teach. Just very basic small gains, nothing really special. Where the good trades and other bad trades, I have to say, come in is in the second week. Because I did end up having an actual red week here. If you notice how the days actually played out, I was actually already red on the month when this big day came. And again, that's because of this second week here. So what kind of trades did I take? So the first one was Rivian. Now, for those who know what Rivian is obviously electric vehicle stock. They're a legitimate company. By all means, they are not, your typical scammy penny stock that I like to trade. However, you also know I will trade pretty much any kind of ticker or stock that has an extended enough run, right? If it has a multi-day run kind of like Rivian had, I was looking to get short and look for, nothing extreme, but a pullback to, 23, 22, maybe 21 if it just sold off better than I expected. Which I think was reasonable. Again, looking in hindsight now, it's easy to say, well, that wasn't reasonable at all. It never even got below 23. It touched like the low 23s at best. But ultimately, I ended up just taking two losses on this trade that really, I don't know why I was so frustrated with them, but because I kind of knew maybe in the back of my head that this wasn't worth risking that kind of money, seeing how it was trading, seeing how it was playing out. But here I am risking a full-size loss of, $5-6 grand. it is what it is. It's not a big deal, but I describe it how I am currently right now, because this is, I think, what set the precedent for the rest of my month, which led me to CVNA, which again was not a good scenario to be in. So in terms of the actual trades, this was the first one where I just overstayed. And again, this was on 7:10. So if we go back to the chart here, literally on this day, right? So we get a great wash right out the open. And again, I get short, a little bit in pre-market, but it holds my risk level, which I believe I was risking. Well, let me go back here. I believe I was risking previous day's high or so, or if not pre-market highs, probably pre-market highs, because they're pretty much double topped at the yesterday's highs. So call it 26. And then, again, no really morning spike right out the open, just pulled with a lot of selling volume. And so you actually do see me add into these bounces, covered a little bit into that wash, had actually another piece of covers like right below this. I remember the low of day was like 23.55, 56. I was sitting in like 23.40s. I was right there to cover more. But then it bounced, and so I added some back. I thought, okay, this is out of the ordinary. But then it became out of the ordinary, right? It held green, spiked, came back, tested green again, held again, and then I cut it. I said, nope, we're not going to do this. I know this could easily go higher after holding green like that, and after such a sell-off, it should have stayed weak, but it didn't. So I lost 6,500 there. So again, a little bit bigger than I wanted. Again, tried reshorting late day, but it just kept holding up. And I said, nope, no thanks. We're going to get rid of that one. Now, you'd think I would have said, okay, the red day kind of attempt is shot. I'm going to give up. But no, I wanted to come back for more. I still thought to myself, we could pull up or we could pull back more. And so I ended up giving it another chance here and losing again. In this case, another 4,700. If we go to the trade here. So again, getting short pre-market, adding some size into that morning spike, risking red-green. Again, we get some kind of weakness, but after that weakness pretty much ends within the first 15 minutes, just, kind of like yesterday or the day before, the strength comes into play. And I cover red-green, I short again, I cover again on red-green, which was, again, this cover right here was really, really silly because I knew red-green wasn't that meaningful considering it just broke it not even 15 minutes ago. Really, this should have been the risk level. And again, had it been that risk level, I actually would have made some money covering back down into here. But either way, it doesn't really matter much, the fact that it still didn't go as low as I wanted, right? It never even broke the low a day that is set in the morning. And so, yeah, I would have made some money back, but it wouldn't have changed much, right? Maybe I would have made a couple grand back, but again, I lost 4,700 on it. It still would have been a red trade either way. And so that's why you see me title this white flag. I'm just waving the white flag on this thing. I'm giving up. I'm done. In terms of losses, again, losing 6K and then losing 5K isn't too out of the ordinary. That's kind of an average loss for me in many, many ways. But just the back-to-back of taking them on a stock that, again, I don't think deserved that kind of risk. Again, like I said, set the kind of the momentum or set the, just set the tone for how the rest of my month was going to go. And again, I didn't know it at the time, but in hindsight, it's like this was really the beginning of kind of just dealing and accepting, just trading really crappy stocks. And again, I don't mean crappy as in like companies. I just mean in terms of what I like to trade, this is just not it, right? It's just not my A+ setup. I shouldn't really have been risking this much on this kind of trade. And so you get the gist. So there's that. Now, so that's in kind of scattered throughout these days here. Oh, whoops, sorry there. That's kind of scattered throughout these days. The next trade I ended up taking was KSCP. So KSCP, unfortunately, I took a, $6,700 or $6,700 loss on this day right here on the 13th. And the reason why is because I just took 2 attempts. So again, I took 2, call it 3, a little over 3K attempts each, which then totaled to just under 7K, which again, isn't too out of the ordinary. But again, you give something multiple attempts for me, and it results in a bigger loss than I really want. It was particularly on this day. Again, we're like the 13th. And so to look at my trades here to show you guys, KSCP, it was gapping down because, again, if we go to pre-market, had a huge run after hours. And so I thought, this is going to gap up. This should be an awesome runner. And then hopefully I'll short it eventually one of the days down the line. Whatever happened pre-market, I don't know, but it just really got crushed. And so when it came back pre-market, I thought to myself, okay, this is like a gift of a bounce, right? I can get short here in pre-market, treat it as an overextended gap down, and then hopefully it'll just die off because this seems like backside. Again, not a ton of volume pre-market, obviously, but I can't deny this kind of pullback should mean something, right? And so that's why you do see me get short pre-market quickly right out the open. I add some more, but then it goes straight red-green, like right away. And I'm like, okay, I'm wrong. So I cut it. But then immediately fails back red. Feel like it's holding red for a bit. So I do short some more. Comes back green. But again, same thing that with that Rivian example. Like I said, I cut when it went back green again, but I knew that wasn't the right risk level. I thought to myself, I should probably be risking the highs here. And so I don't cut it when it goes back red-green here. But then I see it hold green, right? You see this little dip and it doesn't even, I say hold red-green, but it doesn't even touch it, right? It actually holds better than that. And then I realized, nope, we're done. Like, I don't need to wait for this at this point. Like, this clearly is holding way better. There was no sense of weak price action whatsoever at this point for me. And so I do cut it. And again, losing about 3K, a little bit over each time, results to a, negative 6K or $6,700 loss. So that's that. The reason why I mention this, again, and it further is going to show you the trend of how this month goes for me, is that, not to skip over any trades, but the next week, I still trade KSCP, and I actually only end up making, 7,900, right, on this day. This was a day when finally a short report came out. I had got short into these bounces, into this pull, and then I really got a nice pull all the way down to, the 150s, which is where I thought it could go, which again is a great red day, right? If we go to the daily chart, I love how this ended up looking, right? We ended up going higher, which is great after I took that loss. And then this is a great red day. Like, this is what I love to see. This is my bread and butter. The problem was, and it wasn't necessarily I was over or undersizing. Again, the problem is I took the same size that I was risking on this day. The problem was I took two losses and I only took one win here, right? And so, yeah, I did make more than I lost, right? I ended up being up, like $1,000, $1,200. But again, that's not good risk reward over the course of a runner, right? Like, when I look at a daily chart like this and I know how my trading usually goes, I should be walking away with 10, 20 grand, I would say, net profit from a run like this. And so to walk away from a loss and then a gain and only walk away with, like $1,200, again, it's better to being red by all means, don't get me wrong. But it's just frustrating to know that my risk reward of terms of like a losing trade on it and then the winning trade on it didn't change much the bottom line. Okay, so that was the first instance that this happened, because again, it does happen, I think, one or two more times throughout the month, which again is very frustrating. I'm being given these great opportunities, but I'm not coming away with any significant amount of money, right? So hopefully that you get that gist. And again, that was the mix of, again, KSCP, I took that on in this week, but then that was on this day when I actually profited on it. So again, it's separate, but it doesn't make the difference that, again, the bottom line of that ticker overall didn't change much once it came down to it. So the next big winner that I had, and loser that I had to end off this week, was NKLA. So NKLA was a really great runner back in June. I talked about that trade, and I went in detail for Clover Trading subscribers with a video lesson. But I couldn't help but notice after a while, and I even said this again, and I believe in both videos, that like I would love for this to keep running higher. Why I had that kind of intuition or that guesstimation about it, I just thought to myself, like, it wouldn't surprise me that it would. I don't really know why. It just given all the volume, given the fact that it kept holding $1, I thought to myself, like, something's up with this. And so I ended up actually taking a long trade in one of these days. I forget exactly when I took it. It was either the 7th or the 8th, it's the 7th or the 10th, risking this bottom of like 130 with the idea that eventually it's going to break over 150 and then break this high of 180 and be a really sick breakout. Now, did I know or did I expect that it was going to have this kind of a move all in one day? No. I just got lucky in the fact that they ended up putting out a PR, and then that really brought in a lot of volume and a lot of attention, so the breakout worked much quicker than I expected. But in some ways, I'm not going to complain. It ended up being a much bigger gain much sooner than I had anticipated. And so looking at the trade here, I only have a picture of the day I actually traded it. But again, I had a small starter of the swing a couple days ago. I decided to add when it kind of broke over that or started retesting and breaking over the 150s. Because again, that was kind of that line in the sand, right? If you look at here, any significant close or price action over 150 that's going to hold, will be the first in, call it, almost a month. And so really since this red day or these 2 days here on this run. So that's why I then ended up adding there like I did. Sold some into the breakout level, sold some more when it kind of was approaching $2. Thought about re-adding here, but again, it did such a big spike so soon. I ended up just not rebuying because I still had some left. Sold the rest up here in the 2 teens area, and it locked in 14 grand. This was actually, I believe, the biggest. Was it the biggest gain for me at the time, or for the month? Right? Yeah. So just under 15 grand. Like that was so very uncommon for me. A long trade was my biggest win for the month. To show you how poorly I did short selling wise. And also to note, like I looked at my stats of all my trades. I was profitable on the long side. I was unprofitable on the short side. So very uncommon, but it has happened in previous months before. And so this is another one where shorting was actually the reason I was unprofitable, not longing. Again, I still can't believe how. And longing, I was like profitable on like a 27% win rate. That's like, again, that lets me know I'm really good risk reward wise this month on longs, but it doesn't change the fact that I just did terrible on shorting, which is why I ended up red. So anyways, to move on to there. So that's great. I made 14K here, but then CVNA, and this is where this comes into play. I had lost 14K on CVNA here. And for those who know the backstory, I was originally actually long this thing from like $12, thinking the fact that, a lot of short sellers thought this company's going bankrupt. They're in a tight position. They have a lot of debt, yada, yada, yada. But there was a lot of shorts and they could get squeezed because I just didn't think that they were going to go bankrupt as quickly as everyone thought they might have. And unfortunately, that thesis for me was so lightly held that I longed it from getting 12 to like 15 and just got scared and sold. Right? Like literally a couple days before then this huge move to the 20s, I then actually tried rebuying this breakout and then got faked out on this little wick, this small little wick here for them to see it go even higher. And so without this entire time, I'm just trading it very poorly. I remember taking some losses all throughout this area as well. I believe I remember, if you remember me, I talked about that in the June recap. And so here comes in July, and we get this blow off, right? We get this move from the mid-20s all the way up to as high as like the mid-40s. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, this is the final move. Like this has got to be squeezing out even more shorts. This should offer a really solid pullback. Again, very similar to some of the red days we've seen here. There's no reason in my head, I'm like, well, this just went from 25 to 45. There's no reason why this can't pull back from like 40 down to like 35, maybe even 32, 33. And we got nothing but that, right? We never even got lower than 34, and it's still have yet to be lower than 34. And so if we go into the actual chart here, I didn't touch it on the day, or I should say, I don't remember if I touched it in the morning, but I definitely missed the parabolic when it went to 45. So if we go back here, this huge move, 44, 45, I did not touch this. And in hindsight, I remember telling myself in the Clover Train chat, I said, if this speeds up to like the 45 area, I would love to get short. And then here it comes, and I do nothing with it. So that was really frustrating because that really put in the kind of the exhaustion. Whoever was still short or whoever wanted to chase it long definitely got caught up in here. And then it faded, pretty much all the rest of the day. Then we come to the next day on a huge gap down. And if you know how I like to trade gap downs, I usually hate them. I would love to get short into a bigger spike. Again, for whatever reason, me being already kind of aggressive and frustrated with this stock as it is, I end up actually taking pretty much, in hindsight, or I guess in looking at the chart here, it doesn't look that bad, getting short here, kind of scaling into this spike and actually then having it work into the mid to late morning. But I didn't cover any. Again, I'm thinking in my head like, oh, okay, this could see 33, 32. Like I got to keep holding and be aggressive because I think, again, that blow-off move was so great. And it does nothing but that, right? It actually squeezes back red-green. And again, the reason why I say I really don't like these entries looking back in hindsight, because yeah, I got short here, but I was risking $40. My risk reward was terrible. Like it was awful getting short here at like say 36.5, risking 40. Which again is probably partially why I didn't cover any here, because I'm like, man, if risk reward needs to be worth it, like this needs to go lower. Which again is just which is why I hate gap downs like this, because it skews me into thinking risk reward needs to be worth it. And if I try to determine that risk reward isn't worth it, I end up not taking the trade, and then I have FOMO. And so all in all, I really hate this kind of setup for that reason. Even though I am technically profitable on it over my career, it's just not a big profitable setup of mine. And so you see it, broke red green, failed under 40. I ended up downsizing and realizing this just isn't working, but I did hold the rest overnight, only to then get stopped out with the rest here. Again, out the open, just an incredible strength right away, telling me I was wrong. So I do cut the rest right above 40 there, right as I broke my risk. And I lost 14 grand on that trade. So very frustrating. Again, even more frustrating so that it just didn't even work how I wanted to in terms of a red day. Like, yeah, maybe the risk reward sucks and I'm not happy about it. But for it to, barely give me a super weak red day on this gap down day, and then the next day just squeeze the living crap out of me and anyone else who was short, at this point, this was really the turning, not the turning point, but like just further kind of hammering down in my brain of how frustrated I am with this thing, which ultimately led to the big loss that I ended up taking the next week. So to kind of lead, I guess I don't even take any other major trades until then. And so that's what ended up happening, right? So it kind of trades in this little range here, doesn't really break down, but I remember actually shorting on this first red day close or red candle. I thought to myself, okay, whoever's been shorting or trying to rebuy it is getting chopped up in this area, but eventually I think this is going to roll over and start fading off, right? I thought it was just going to be a little bit stubborn, but finally it was going to kind of let go and lose itself and lose a bit and then fade off, right? And so I end up getting short. If we go to my trades here, we'll talk about that one in a bit. Here is that KSCP or KSCP red day that I told you about, guys, earlier, where I got short into this bounce and then covered into the 150s. Again, made just under $8,000, but didn't make a much difference after the loss from it. But so here is the CVNA trade. So I called it like a little wedge, even though I'm not a big wedge trader. I just saw that this was kind of tightening in a sense, right? The wicks were kind of getting smaller. The higher lows were kind of getting tighter, right? So eventually I thought a direction needs to be picked. And so I ended up getting short, kind of chop myself around, but stay short, and I hold overnight. I'm like, okay, this is the weakest close it's been. It's kind of closing right at support. Like if we can get a gap down and then morning sell-off, this could look really good and finally break down into the low 30s like I had planned. Come the next day, you notice that's not what happened, right? If we look at the actual trade then after that, if we go here, nothing but strength, right? Actually gaps up, holds green, and then squeezes me. And again, I'm risking $40 again, so I cover it, take a loss. I'm like, okay, that's annoying. Then when the market closes, I don't touch the rest of the day, and the market starts selling off because they announced that they're going to kind of fast track their earnings because they have an announcement to make. And now, in looking at the situation that they were in that I had done quite a bit of looking into, they wanted to kind of quickly escalate their earnings because they needed to put out an offering because they needed to pay off their debt that was coming off soon very quickly, likely in the form of an ATM. And so this is where I probably broke one of my biggest rules in the disguise or in the name of trying to catch an offering, which is, again, it's so stupid. And the problem is I knew it was stupid in the moment. But again, hopefully you're hearing everything I've been saying and all the trades I took up to it and how they affected me from Rivian, from KSCP, from also CVNA, trading it terrible long and then getting chopped up still on the short side. All of these led to just pounding and beating down my level of discipline and rule following to the point where I just kind of folded. Right? Because again, I knew in the moment when I took this trade how dumb it was, but it's like I just kind of ignored that. I didn't care. I was like, no, this is it. Like this is how CVNA finally has a backside and sells off, right? Just telling myself this silly little story. And so I get short because it's just fading off super hard, and people are worried, like, well, why? The market pretty much knows that CVNA is escalating their earnings release to do an offering. And if you know me, I hate at least in this kind of scenario. It's like you just don't hold through you just don't hold through earnings. It's a gamble. It's a guessing game. You have no idea how their earnings are to come. Yeah, there's people who want to play that game and try to guess, earnings per share and revenue and all that. But the reality is I'm not in that department, right? I'm not in that game. And I know that. But here I am thinking to my head, I'm like, okay, well, if, they're going to do earnings, but who cares? They're going to announce an offering. Like the offering is going to cancel out the earnings, good or bad, and it's going to lead to a huge gap down, a huge sell-off, and I'm going to get this amazing cover and this amazing win, right? And so I get short here thinking that, right, that the offering is going to cancel out their earnings. Again, ignoring the fact of the rule that, like, I don't hold their earnings regardless. And again, I'm risking, the high day here in the 40s or 42 range. That's my kind of idea, okay? Now, you can see what happened here, okay? I was on the complete opposite spectrum of how this really played out. Again, I'm thinking that the offering is going to cancel out the earnings. The opposite happened. The earnings canceled out the offering, okay? And so you see here, there's a huge squeeze. And again, I wasn't there. I woke up literally like right here. Okay. And so when and again, stupid, very dumb. I thought I was waking up early enough to catch when they would release earnings at call it 7 a.m. They released it 30 minutes before, which again, when you fast track it, you don't have a good time frame. Otherwise, I would have absolutely woken up then. But again, I was too stupid to add on top of my stupidity, right? I just thought waking up at 7 a.m. was the smart move, or to be prepared for 7 a.m. It wasn't, right? It was 30 minutes too late. And so if you look at my trades here, once I get to the computer, and again, right at 7 a.m. they announced the offering. I'm like, okay, awesome. Like, good. This is my thesis. In my head, I'm like, okay, the offering's canceling out their earnings. But then we start holding, and we keep coming back, and we get back over V-up. And then I make the realization, like, no, the offering hasn't canceled the earnings. The earnings are canceling out the offering. And so then you see me start cutting, and on the top of the fact that it actually held 42 versus, which is where my risk was. Like, again, if I wasn't so tilted, it wasn't so invested in and dug so deep and being stubborn in this trade, covering immediately when I see it, especially when it's holding my original risk level, should have been the case, right? So I cut it, but unfortunately at that point, I'm tilted, I'm biased, I'm revenge trading at this point. You see me take it numerous times. I can't even tell you why I'm taking it at this point, other than just hoping that the offering is actually going to take place and actually bring in some selling pressure. Again, numerous trades, just covering, shorting, just getting nowhere with it. Thinking that we're going to get some kind of pullback to test red green down at the bottom here at $40. Eventually we get to my max stop of 40K. I end up losing like 48K on this ticker on this day. So there was 2K left, but I looked at my P&L. I'm like just stop, Kyle. Like just end it. Like there whatever you're trying to do in your brain, it's over, right? You've lost. And so, again, you combine this trade with all of the other small losses that I took, on the previous days of trying to swing it in the first place from, again, these days and these days. It totaled up to being my biggest loss of the month at 57K. So very frustrating. And the good part about it is, and again, even though it's frustrating, I felt somewhat relieved after this happened because I finally had kind of woken up from whatever degenerative and just frustrating trading I was going through. I finally just accepted the fact that however much money I lost in CVNA, I was not going to make it back. It's gone. It's over. It's not coming back. I'm going to be red on this ticker forever. I have no intentions of trading it again. Even on this red day, I kind of had a feeling after everyone got squeezed out here that the next day might be a red day. But for me, I just told myself, like, you know what? I've already emotionally kind of hit my limit on this thing. I've numerically, number-wise, hit my limit in terms of P&L on this thing. You're done. You're cut off. And so, yeah, you could say I missed this. But again, if I had shorted any size on this to try to make money back, it would have only further encouraged the bad habits that have caused me to get in this position in the first place. So I really have no FOMO missing this. Even to this day, I still have not traded CVNA from that. And even then, when I look at this daily chart, it's still up higher than I would ever expected, right? The way the earnings went for them, the way they kind of structured their offering and the whole way and the way they went about it completely killed any kind of short thesis that I had in this entire run-up that I just accepted. I accepted defeat. I accepted that I'm never going to make money on this thing. And it faded down, finally back down to 41. But again, I was short from here. It's silly. It's incredible how off I was on this. But again, luckily, this is why I have better risk parameters than I did last year. If you've been watching some of my previous videos in the previous years, you saw how bad some of the other losses used to get. So the big picture, to only lose 57 and to cut myself off like I intended to, even before the technical max stop, I'm actually happy about. But again, doesn't change the fact that it's frustrating, doesn't change the fact that it's still annoying. Nonetheless, it happened and I moved on. Still have yet to touch it, which again, I will not be touching it. It's over. So anyways, that's that. In terms of PSQH, this was a great runner. And so this is where because I said, like I mentioned, I felt relieved after cutting it off, I ended up having my next best green day of the month, right? It was, again, I almost was relieved. Whatever stress or just tension or just over trading and revenge trading I had, I just finally let go. And so that really actually led to a great day on the Friday. And mainly most of it was from PSQH here. So PSQH was a SPAC that ended up then taking a company public, and a huge run from $10 all the way up to 36. Great first 2 red or green days in a row. I was looking for the first red day. And so if we go into the intraday here, we get a beautiful kind of squeeze out in pre-market. And I remember thinking to myself, as I saw this bounce back to red green in pre-market, I said, nope, I'm not going to take this. This thing has a lot of range, has a big spread. Let me just wait for the market open, because I knew better if I got short here and then it actually stopped me out pre-market all before the open. I would have been very pissed. I would have continued. I saw where I was going to get tilted before it even happened. And so that's why I ended up not taking it, which again saved me a loss and actually led me to be better prepared for shorting it out the open. And so what happened was here, not this one here, this is the next trade, but this is the actual red day. I do take a starter and then immediately cut it that same minute, right? If you look here on stocks to trade, I get short in this minute and then it really breaks that high, right? The high of day here is like 30.98 and it breaks it by just 10 cents or so, by 31. Like my risk was pretty much 31. And so I do cut that right away. I said, nope. And again, all this volume came in. So I thought that volume was continuing to like a morning spike. Cut that, but then it immediately failed. And so that to me was like, oh, like we're actually weak. All this volume was only 1 minute and then it was done. And so I actually started reshorting. I said to myself, okay, this is actually weak. Volume is staying low. It's not staying as big as the first minute. Let me get short, risk that high, and see where it goes. And it ended up being great, right? It actually ended up tapping and testing red green twice and failing, only further confirming that my trade plan is probably right here. Pulls, new low day. This bounce actually sketched me out a little bit. I thought to myself, this is a bit stronger than I would have liked, but it technically did stay under VWAP. And then we finally got the pullback that I was looking for, covered again a piece into 24 and then covered the rest into the 22s here. Ultimately ended up making just under $9,000 on this trade. Yes, it faded the rest of the day, but again, it only went about maybe $1 or $2 lower than where I covered. The real mistake I ended up making was again, the next day when right here. And I say that because this is another example for me, like KSCP, where again, I made $9,000, okay, on this red day. Great, awesome. It's a great gain for me, especially after such a big loss, like CVNA. I'm stoked, I'm happy. We come into the next week on PSQH thinking I'm going to see a second red day out of this. At least my hypothesis was that. And yes, we technically get it, but I managed the trade really poorly on top of the fact of some slippage, and I ultimately ended up giving back, what was it, just under $7,000, right? So if you look at the trade here, got short, risking red-green, looked a little bit weak. Again, same idea, one little big volume candle, but then the rest stayed weak. And I got short, risking red-green, and it doesn't look like a lot, but this was a full, because again, I didn't really cover much, or I didn't fill much until the very last candle here at the top. So this was like a good 40 cents of slippage for me from the red-green mark. On top of the fact that I was already a little bit oversized by like 1,000 or 2 shares. And so you add on top of that, and I lose 7K, or I lose 7K, and I made 9K on the day before. Again, it's just like KSCP, where it's like I look at a daily chart like this, and I'm like, this is the kind of daily chart that should lead me to be making multiple, five figures, 10, 20, maybe even $30,000 on a daily chart like this. This is a beautiful first red day. Everything about this I love. Everything about this makes me tell me it's ideal. And I walked away from this entire run up 2K. Again, green, it's good. But when we're talking about other losses and gains like CVNA, like NKLA, and then I'm left with a runner like this, and the bottom line P&L is $2,000, it's not going to get me where I want to go. Again, not knocking $2,000, but when you're talking about the ratios of how much I make or lose on any given ticker on any given run, this is just like KSCP, where it's like looking at these dailies, I underperformed immensely. On top of that, because it ended up actually going red, right, or actually ended up having a red day. I got stopped out there, lost too much, had some slippage, was pissed because I had realized in that moment I just pulled another KSCP. And I never reshorted. And it actually ended up fading pretty decently. I remember thinking this could go to 18 today. And so getting short in the mid-20s, I was trying to, risk 50 cents to make $2 or so. And it would have been a great gain had I done it. But didn't reshort, screwed up there, and that's that. So very frustrating there. The rest of the week, not much happened for me. Most of these days, I honestly don't remember what else happened. I forget even what happened on the 24th here. But ultimately, the 2 big trades that really closed my month well which is I significantly remember, which was BBIG. If you look here. So BBIG, I forget why this even ran in the first place. I don't even think I remember touching it on this first red day because it just looked very choppy to me, and I ended up being right. Didn't even short on this bounce, but I ended up actually noticing the news in after hours that they were going to get delisted, like all of a sudden, right? Not even they weren't even declaring bankruptcy. They just were getting delisted because they were not filing correctly with the NASDAQ. They didn't meet the NASDAQ's requirements. And I remember getting back to my screens. Again, I usually try to leave right after the market close. I get back to my screens with that $3, and I'm like, they're going to delist like that? You know, they're going to delist so suddenly, so abruptly after having such an incredible run. And again, this thing was, you know, at like below $1, or sorry, not $1. It was like a 150, 125, not even a month ago. I'm thinking to myself, this thing could sell off like drastically. Like again, anyone who's long here, and is whatever reason why they're long it, just got hit with a big kind of surprise that, you know, you're going to get delisted. Sorry, here 1 second, guys. I'm going to plug this in so the computer doesn't die on me. And so, yeah, I got short. I immediately got short. And you might be silly, like, oh my gosh, Kyle, you're chasing here. And yeah, I admitted I was chasing in my head. I just knew to myself, I'm like, again, for what I just explained, this could go much lower. Again, it would have been nice had I got maybe if I saw it earlier and gotten short in the mid threes. But as it was bouncing here, I'm like, this is a perfect time for me to get short. And so I scale into this bounce here. Unfortunately, I ended up only having like a low threes average, like a 302, 303. I unfortunately took too much size in this first candle, but then this size kind of brought me back over a 3 average. But once we closed like that, once we again closed after hours down at $3 or below $3 really, I then thought to myself, okay, this probably shouldn't get back over 330, especially opening up on the OTC. And again, that's what happened. We ended up gapping down below $2. I thought, okay, that's great. We did have a morning spike, which made me feel a little bit uncomfortable. But I did end up covering some of the dips here, and then covered the rest when I got back to sub 2. Ended up making just under 10 grand. And even then, that was, you know, underestimating it. Ended up going as low as $1 the rest of the day. And then if I held another day after that, ended up going to the gray sheets with no level 2, and now it's down to 50 cents. So such a brutal and quick way to kill a stock. Once at $5 and not even 3 days later, it's down 90%. Just crazy. Again, if we look at my charts here, so that was the entry. Maybe go to the actual covers and the exit. Again, see that morning spike? I cover on the dips, cover the rest sub 2, and that was 10 grand there. The other, in that same day, so I made 10 grand there. The other day was TUP. So TUP, as I say it, we're actually up huge at 650. I think they put out news that they're restructuring their debt. But nonetheless, I did trade this really well on this day, on the 28th of July, mainly because it ended up giving you like a red day sell-off, but actually ended up closing green. And so normally that probably would have chopped me up a bit, given how the kind of month I've been having. But I handled it really, really well. And so I'll show you here why I liked it so much. Because again, if you notice in the daily chart, it kind of always had 2 green days and a red day. 2 green days and a red day. And so that's kind of what I was expecting out of this, right? We had 1 green day, red day. I ended up making like 4 grand on this day here. Nothing special because, again, it was kind of a lower price. It wasn't that extended yet. But as it extends itself even further, I loved the fact that this had a really good parabolic and then kind of backside move into late day, and then gapped up right into this resistance, right? Because frankly, it's going to have to take a lot for that stock to be able to kind of open up so close to it and then actually have even more strength out the open to then push over that level. And so I actually ended up getting short here in pre-market, kind of having that conviction that, like, I don't think it has the juice to even test this level out the open. And I was right. So did get short a little bit, but then thought I was premature, so covered. Then I realized it's still weak, so I'm like, okay, let's re-short. Again, risking that previous day's high. Didn't even need to happen. Like I said, very weak open as I expected. Added some more, covered some. This ad right here on the bounce looks really good. Like, it looks like I perfectly timed this. The problem is I actually tried to time it too well. And the fact that I put my order at 318, the high was exactly 318. So you might be like, oh, awesome, Kyle, you put it in the top. Not so much. I filled like 47 shares. So the 5,000 shares that I wanted to add back on, I filled like less than 1% of the shares I wanted. And so even though it looks cool, I had no size. So pretty kind of frustrating. I tried to lower my order down, but eventually it just kept selling off to the point it never actually bounced back to where I lowered my order to. It happens. It is what it is. But I still had the majority of my size left. It's not like I covered it all here. I still had like 3/4 of my size left. I only covered a fourth here. And so then I ended up covering the rest down here. Avoided this huge kind of squeeze late day. Ended up closing green in the day. So into my head, I was like, great. This technically had a red day sell off, but it ended up closing green. I'm like, that's awesome. And so it ended up having to go even further. But again, we'll talk about the rest of this ticker and how it plays out in August, because clearly, again, if we go back to the intraday, whatever PR they just put out in after hours about restructuring their debt, whoever was short, I don't know who, just got squeezed. It's actually going to gap up over the highs of $6. So pretty darn impressive. Hopefully TUP is a great runner and continue to bring a lot of momentum into August. But yeah, that's it, guys. That pretty much brought me to, again, being down at my worst. I was down 60 or 70K. So to bring that down after a good week down to 32K, we'll take it. I'm glad I didn't pay so much in borrow fees. Some of these previous months I've had pretty high borrow fees. That was not the case this month, so that was cool. But again, you'll notice, again, just to play like what if, let's just delete my worst day of CVNA, right? Let's just delete that day. See how that drastically changes? I have a full 180. I go from pretty much down 30 grand to up 30 grand in a month. So hopefully you can see just how big of a difference that makes and how much really it changes the bottom line to avoid big losses. And again, it reminds me, and it makes me think to want to clamp down even more of like, a max stop for me is in place so that you don't lose too much. But even hitting it is obviously not a good thing, right? And so I think you've heard that in my voice throughout this video. Again, I was relieved to finally be done with it. But again, I can't help but look at this month and be like, I can trade it better than this. I really, really can. And so hopefully August will be better. Unfortunately, not the best start. I don't really like this having a 10K losing day. I would really like to go into the rest of the month not losing, having multiple, 5-figure red days. I would like to have the opposite of having multiple 5-figure green days. But again, we will see how August goes. Unfortunately, August has been a tougher month for me in the past. You may say, okay, why don't you just stop trading? And in some cases, I totally could. But August actually in 2020 was actually pretty good. But 2021 was a pretty tough one. Still green, but again, lower than my average of that year. 2022 was also low, again, at 12K. But we'll see. I want to give it August a chance. Again, something like TUP happening. There's a lot of runners. NKLA, I believe, is again at its highs, even higher than where it traded at this breakout. So a lot going on, a lot happening. We will see how it comes out in the end of it all. So anyway, guys, thanks so much for watching. I appreciate you guys. And again, if you haven't bought a ticket to the Clover Trading Bootcamp, I highly recommend it. I'd love to see you there and talk in person. Other than that, guys, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next month. Peace.